I have to say, Shane, this one I'm really excited for. This interview. This is a person, a man that puts together the greatest college football yearbook every year. I've been buying it at the stores now. You can get it at Barnes and Noble every year. It is Phil Steele's college football 2021 preview. It's outstanding, and we have the man himself, Phil Steele, here joining us on Wildcat Country. Phil, first of all, thank you so much for taking time to join Shane and I. My number one question to you is, so you don't have a lot of great things to say about the University of Arizona, which I guess none of us do going into this rebuilding season. What is the best case scenario for the Wildcats as you see it in 2021?
Well, there are some winnable games on the schedule, I think, for Arizona, even though and you hit it correctly on the head. This is a rebuilding season. First-year head coach, there's going to be a massive amount of transfers coming in and out. So even though Arizona's got technically 17 returning starters coming back, I think when the season starts, not all 17 of those guys will have their starting job. So it's going to be less experience than that. The BYU game, I think, would be extremely tough to win in the opener. But San Diego State, if Arizona can catch them, that is a possible one. Northern Arizona would be a good win there. And then you look at the rest of the schedule. Maybe Cal at home would be a game I give them a shot at. And there's always a chance of, maybe one upset. So be honest with you guys, best case scenario, probably looking at 4-8 in his first year would be an absolute best case scenario.
Yeah, Phil, like Eric said, we appreciate you joining us. Eric's already showing off his physical version of the magazine. I downloaded the digital one, and we really appreciate your time. Two-part question for you. How did you feel about the Jedfish hire when it was made, and how do you feel about it now?
Well, Jed Fish had not been a head coach before. He'd spent some time in the NFL, and I'm a college guy, so I hadn't really followed the most recent years for Jed. But after talking to him, I definitely like the hire. I think that he's a guy that brings enthusiasm, is a guy that has studied under some pretty good head coaches. I mean, when you just spent the previous year with Bill Belichick at New England, then that's a pretty good learning tree to have there. And I think he's a guy that's going to come in. He's enthusiastic. He wants to elevate Arizona, keep the recruits in Arizona, and I think he's going to do a good job there.
Breaking down Arizona's offense going into the season, you said in your magazine that it'll improve, but it'll be definitely a rebuilding year, like you said. The running back and wide receiver rooms look pretty good to me. The obvious question is a quarterback, and then you have the offensive line, which has some returning starters, but has not been a stellar unit of late. What are your overall thoughts on the Wildcats offense going into the season?
Yeah, I think quarterback is going to be key, and I believe that Jordan McLeod, Will Plummer, give them two capable QBs. So watch McLeod at South Florida, and he had some good games there. Will Plummer did a good job at times in his brief one start that he had last year. And so they do have some talent there at the quarterback position. As you mentioned, though, you got to like the running backs with Jalen Johns, Stevie Rocker, Drake Anderson, Michael Wiley. Good talent there. And Stanley Berryhill is an NFL caliber receiver in my mind. I think he's a guy that should be poised to have a pretty good season. The offensive line is going to be your biggest question mark on the team because of the fact that last year they weren't great. And while they have a lot of players returning, so do a lot of offensive lines in the country. Only getting 17.4 points per game last year was pretty bad, but I think they'll be improved. I do not see them being in the upper half of the Pac-12, though.
The defensive side, you noted Arizona has 9 returning starters, but that could be an area where some of those starters lose their job, and they have to adjust to a new scheme. Then, of course, you have Don Brown, who might have to get used to a Pac-12 offenses on his end. Give me an overview of the defense and maybe a couple of guys to watch on that side of the ball.
Well, I think when Don Brown comes in, I've been a big Don Brown fan. It's just been the last 2 years they sort of struggled, and maybe teams caught on to him. I think the advantage for Don Brown coming in here is that he is bringing in his defense and the Pac-12 getting to see it basically for the first time. I think they'll have success early on. The key to a Don Brown defense is going to be your cornerback position. And Arizona's got 2 good cornerbacks. Chris Rowland-Wallace and Isaiah Rutherford are 2 guys that are both NFL caliber guys at the cornerback position. They both have the size that you want and the good speed, good length. So to have good cornerbacks, that really helps out the Don Brown defense. Then you look up front, a guy like Trayvon Mason at nose tackle. gives them some good size in the middle at 315 pounds. Jalen Harris, at defensive end, can provide that pass rush that you need. And then Anthony Pandy, of course, at the linebacker position, one of the better linebackers in the Pac-12. So overall, there's talent there. I think Don Brown will have success in his first year improving this defense. And I think maybe the teams just got caught on to his defense the last couple of years after seeing it so many times. But I think for the last 5 years, he had a top 5 defense.
Well, that's exciting. I mean, there's at least some reasons for optimism. We had Coach Jed Fish on the other week, and obviously he was optimistic about his roster, but it's nice to hear some strong points from you as well, Phil. I think what I want to know from you from a national perspective, what is Arizona football to you, thinking about it? I know you're in Ohio. How do you view Arizona football year in, year out?
Well, I mean, Arizona has had success. You go back to 2014, it was an outstanding 10-4 season, the Fiesta Bowl, and it wasn't that long ago. And then the last 3 years have not been so good. I think nationally, if you talk about teams and how they're perceived, everybody pretty much looks at last year, maybe the last 2 years. And if you do that with Arizona, you don't have a great feel. But remember last year, if you look at Arizona, go back to that USC game. I thought Arizona was going to win that game and pull the upset. Came up just short on that one. And then, later in the year, they had another blown opportunity where there was a good first half and then a poor second half. But they've shown that, I think in the past, that they can get there. Right now, Arizona is clearly, in my mind, in a rebuilding year and one of the weakest teams in the Pac-12 this year. But that doesn't mean they're going to stay there for very long.
Let's talk about the Pac12 South, and I know our rivals to the north, where Shane and I live in the Valley, in the Phoenix area. ASU has a lot of expectations, but in your magazine, you have them third in the South Division. Why do you have them low as compared to USC and Utah?
Well, they're up there talent-wise. I think when you take a look at my power poll in the magazine, I've got USC 11, Utah 15, and Arizona State 20. I like the talent Arizona State has. They've got all 11 starters back on defense, including plenty of NFL caliber guys. And offensively, they've got an exciting quarterback in Jaden Daniels. How about the running backs with Rashad White and Chip Trainum? Those are two guys that can break it and take it to the house anytime they want. The receiving core with Johnny Wilson, Brian Thompson, Curtis Hodges loaded, and the offensive line is solid. So this is a really good team and a dangerous one at that. Probably the schedule came out. USC doesn't have to play the top two teams, Oregon and Washington, in the north. Meanwhile, Arizona State does have to play Washington on the road this year. They also have to play Utah on the road this year. So I think there's a couple of games that are going to be an underdog in. Meanwhile, when I look at USC and Utah, I only have each of them an underdog in maybe 1 or 2 games this year. So I'm high on Arizona State. I think they'll have a good year. And then the other factor that went into it was all these question marks coming around. With the investigation that's going on right now, you wonder if anything's going to impact the team just prior to the season.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Phil. And we don't like to spend too much time talking about our rivals to the north on this show, but we just thinking, because Herm Edwards was a Pac-12 Media Day and said this is not going to be a distraction. There's no cloud hanging overhead. In your experience, when teams have this kind of off-field stuff to think about or to potentially deal with, does it prove to be a distraction on the field, or do you think it might not be an issue for ASU this year?
Probably depends how the team does early on. If Arizona State can win their first 5 games, and there's a couple tough ones in there. They have to beat BYU on the road. That's not going to be easy. They have to beat UCLA on the road. That's not going to be easy. But if they were to be 5-0, I think they would toss those distractions to the side, provided there was no losses or anything, or probation or anything like that happening. And all of a sudden, you'd see a completely different team down the stretch. Now, lose a couple of games early on, and all of a sudden, maybe the players start thinking about that stuff. So I think early success is what you need to overcome that.
Circling back to the Wildcats now, since we are Wildcat country, we try to be objective about the Wildcats here, but we're a couple of alums. It's not always easy. This program, like you alluded to, has had some very good individual seasons over the years, but very little sustained success. What in your mind do you think will it take for that to change, and for Arizona, Jed Fish to turn this program that's a perennial top 25 team, or at the very least in the top half of the Pac-12 consistently?
It's college football, so I'm going to throw out the R word, recruiting. And, it's easier to recruit when you're coming off a winning season or a bowl season than it is when you're coming off an 0-5 season. And so I think recruiting is going to be huge. But of course, getting to that bowl game would be a big plus because winning begets winning. And I'll take a look at the Iowa State program, for example. With Iowa State, when Matt Campbell was hired 6 years ago, if he would have said, Phil, Iowa State's going to be a national title contender in 6 years, I would have laughed. I mean, impossible. Iowa State's never been good. They've never even been ranked, for crying out loud, very often, if at all. And look what Matt Campbell's done. They won a little bit the second year, and then they won a little more, and they recruited better, and won a little more, recruited better. Now all of a sudden they're a national title contender. So winning and recruiting are the two things that pull a program up from the bootstraps.
Phil, one thing that's obviously been very much discussed over the last week or two in college football is realignment. And I personally think the Big 12 is toast, with Texas and Oklahoma likely going to the SEC. What do you make of the Pac-12 going forward? Do you see them expanding, staying put, or breaking apart?
I would go with the Pac-12 expanding. I think that would be a key there because, like you said, the Big 12, I mean, what do they do now? And all of a sudden now the American Conference is inviting the Big 12 teams to come over there, as opposed to the Big 12 turning down some of the American teams last year. So I think the Pac-12 is strong enough, his location is good enough, and I think they can definitely add some key teams. I mean, you had a team like a BYU, a Boise State, a couple of key ones. Maybe try to get Iowa State out of the Big 12. I mean, look what Matt Campbell's doing there. I would think expansion is my take on the Pac-12. The one thing they can't do is stand pat, because if you stand pat, then your options of expansion are going to be pretty much gone as other teams find other places.
The other issue being discussed in college football is the NIL, and yesterday it came out that Quinn Ewers, the top prospect for 2022, may reclassify to 2021 and play for Ohio State this year at quarterback because he could get paid large sums of money, as being sponsored. Do you think this is a very dangerous precedent for college football in that kids are going to be playing too early just to get money?
Yeah, not necessarily kids playing too early, but I do think it sort of opens up that Pandora's box, and now you have whichever team has the best boosters and the deepest pockets goes and gets themselves the best recruits every year. I think it's going to be a rich get richer type of thing. You saw Nick Saban say it at the SEC media days. Hey, we're paying our quarterback who's never started $1 million, and they can do that at those schools. So I think it's been going on for the longest time in college football, back in the 60s, 70s, where there's been cash under the table. Now it just brings it above board, and I think it'll turn out to be the rich get richer.
Phil, we appreciate your time very much. I got one more question for you. I don't want to reveal too much because I want people obviously to go buy the magazine because that's fantastic. But maybe just give us a surprise Pac-12 team, one team that maybe some analysts are low on, that maybe you're a little higher on going into the season.
Well, I appreciate that, Shane. And my number one surprise team every year is a non-top 10 team. That's the classification I have. Can't be ranked in the top 10, that I think has a shot at making the playoff. And we've had a pretty good track record with these. Back in 2016, we had the Washington Huskies. They believe they entered the season number 14. They ended up making the playoff that year. In 2018, Notre Dame was not a top 10 team. I had my number one surprise team. They made the playoff, which is rare because we know the same 4 teams or 5 teams make the playoff every year. Last year, or 2 years ago, I should say, it was Utah. And they were my number one surprise team, not in the top 10 at the start of the year. Had they won the Pac-12 title game, they would have made the playoff that year. And then last year it was Texas A&M. Coming off a 5-loss season, they made it as my number one surprise team. And they were on Selection Sunday. They almost made the playoffs. So this year, I'm going back to the Washington Huskies, and here's why. I know they were picked second in the North by the media, and very few people picked them to actually win the Pac-12 this year, but I like their big offensive line. Averages about 328 pounds per man. They've got a deep bevy of running backs. They've got 2 veteran quarterbacks now that they bring in the Colorado State transfer and Patrick O'Brien. They've got a very good tight end room led by Cade Otton and some good receivers. And defensively, Jimmy Lake always does a great job on defense. They've had just 2 and 6 returning starters the last 2 years. This year they have 8. But schedule, love it. They avoid USC and Utah out of the South, which I feel are the best 2 teams. Their toughest 2 games all year are Oregon and Arizona State. And they get both those at home. And I'll say this about home field edges this year, guys. I feel we're going to have the best home field edges, maybe ever in college football, because fans got deprived of going to the stadiums last year. We saw the attendance been dwindling in recent years. I think that attendance gets a huge spike this year because fans are allowed back in the stadiums, and they'll be louder than ever. So home field edge is going to mean a lot. Your two toughest games are at home. I actually have Washington favored in all 12 of their games this year, and they are my number one surprise team in the country, or a non-top 10 team. And heck, they might not even be in the top 20 with a chance to make the playoff this year.
And that is why, thanks to Phil Steele, I've already been looking at my bets to place Washington to win the Pac-12, I think at 3.5 to 1. So that's great. Phil, I want to ask you before we let you go, one of my favorite pages in your magazine is page 2, where you talk about football 365 days a year. Can you just explain to everyone listening to this podcast what a typical year looks like for you during college football season and then afterwards?
Yeah, we'll start with the beginning of college football season. It's the first Saturday of the year. I got all 12 TVs fired up in front of me, probably a 13th game on the computer, maybe a 14th game on the computer, and a lot of Diet Mountain Dew. I'm watching every game all day long, all the way till that doggone Hawaii game finishes about 3 o'clock in the morning. Then the rest of my week is watching replays of the game, writing my newsletter, doing some radio shows, but just everything's focused on what just happened, trying to digest everything I can that happened the past week and get ready for the next week, and that goes on each week. So football season, about 102 hours a week. Then comes magazine season, and that starts once team seasons have actually started ending. We go through a 3 write-through process with the magazine. The first write-through is postseason. Once the season ends, we go back and read every article that's written about the team for the year. That way everything's fresh in our mind when it comes to the team, and then you write each position. What kind of shape were they heading into last year? What happened? What kind of shape are they heading into this year? That process takes 2 to 3 months. And then we go to the next step, which is the pre-spring right-through, which now we've added in the freshman players, we've added in transfers, taken out any other deletions, rewrite each of the positions. Then I talk to the coaches, and I talk to about 110 of the 130 head coaches this year. I spend a good hour and a half with each coach. I send them my team pages, which have every single player on the team listed, and all my notes on each player, all the stats on each player. They put me in the right order. Move this guy here, move that guy here. They tell me a little something about each player, tell me who the NFL guys are, tell me who the stars are, and I'll learn a lot from that. Then we go through the third write-through process of the magazine. Finally send the magazine to the press on June 15th. We send it out this year, which will allow us to catch up on most of the transfers. And then the next 2 months is my free time like right now, where I get to do 7 to 10 radio shows a day just talking football. So this is my fun 2 months of the year, but it is pure college football. And I got to tell you, I don't study any other sport, basketball, baseball. I couldn't tell you who the key players were in any of those sports. I'm just full college football year round.
What a life, Phil. What a great life, and what a great service that you do for all of us that read this magazine on a yearly basis. Where can other people buy the magazine and online, like the version Shane got?
I appreciate that, Eric. You can go now. This year we're exclusively at 2 places: Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. So if you have a Barnes & Noble and Books A Million in the area, head there. They are the exclusive sellers of the magazine this year. However, a lot of those places have been selling out, doggone it. It's good and it's bad because folks go looking for them and can't find them. If that happens, just go online. You go to philsteele.com. You can get the hard copy like Eric's got, or you can get the digital version like Shane got, or you can get them both. And Shane, you're going to be pleased to know that this year, the digital version, we're going to be updating all the way until the start of the season. So if there's any transfers going out or injuries that happen, we'll have it all updated in the magazine on the digital version. And you can get both versions at a discount at philsteele.com as well. So that's Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, or philsteele.com.
He's the best in the business. Phil Steele, thank you so much for joining us here in Wildcat Country. We look forward to having you on again down the road.
Hey, sounds great. A lot of fun talking Arizona football with you today. Really enjoyed it.